Alright, for this experiment, resistivity, we're going to do two sets of measurements. And the first one is involving just the top wire across the length of the board. And we're going to measure the resistance at these different points with the screw points on the board. To do that, we're first going to just connect an alligator clip to the far side here, and notice that these are all interconnected with a wire. So we're not going to have to move this for the entire experiment, both parts of the experiment even. We're going to connect the other side to here. But before we do that, we're going to make sure that the fluke meter is all set up. So I'm going to rotate this to the ohms reading to measure resistance, let it set itself and clear itself, and I'm plugged in to these two right here. And then I'm simply going to connect to this screw right here and measure the resistance across there. 7.3 ohms. Then we're just going to measure the resistance at this point and then move the wire to the next screw, and down here at the end we measure the resistance again. So we've measured the resistance at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different points. The second measurement we need to make for the first procedure is the distance between the base and the first screw. But it's the outside, or I'll call this the inside of the nut or the washer, because there's almost no resistance here when the wire is touching the bolt. So we want to measure the length from the base, the furthest point of the base, to the inside of the bolt here. And to do that, I'm going to line up the 1 with on the meter stick instead of the edge, because of edge errors. Line up the 1 with the base here, and come over here and do the best I can to measure this. Please don't mark on the meter stick, but we measure this, so I'm getting 21.7, and I take away 1 because that was at the beginning. So that's the distance from the base to the first screw. The second measurement we made for resistance was at this screw, which is a length of this length plus this length. So we're just going to measure the distance from here, this side of the screw, to this side of the screw. And again, we're going to start at 1 and measure over. And we're going to record this length in the data table as a raw measurement, as the distance between the first screw and the second screw. The length for the resistance is the sum of this distance plus this distance. And then we're just going to move down the board, measuring the length here and so on and so forth, so that when we get to the end of the board, we are measuring the resistance for a length that includes the sum of all these lengths right here. Sorry, as you can tell, this is unrehearsed. For the second part of the procedure, we're going to measure the resistance for the full length of the board for each of these wires. Now these are all nichrome wires, and each one has a different cross-sectional area written here. So you can record these numbers in your data table for part 2. And then simply leave the connector here, and then place the other connector at the end of this board on the far end for each of these wires. This first one should have the same measurement as part 1 of the procedure for the full length. And then you're just going to measure the full length from here to the other end of the board. And all these wires should have the same length. This first wire will have the full length of part 1 of the procedure, because it's the full length of the board minus all the bolts. And that's all that's involved with taking the data.